whatever you need.
Yeah, I appreciate you again doing this.
No, I was looking forward to it, man.
Yeah.
So no, this is should be a good time.
And the fact that you gave me some of your music, that is just spectacular.
Oh, my pleasure,
love
man. Hey.
How long have you been playing?
Wow. Jeez, it's got to be over 25 years playing, guitar, and
Oh, wow.
that's what I started playing, and then ventured into playing bass, and then actually upright bass, and now it's kind of I got turntables, got all sorts of instruments and stuff, and I trying to get my kids into that too. So
I saw that on your law firm's website. Do you also DJ?
I not as much, with the pandemic and everything, the places have kind of shut down, but I have done things in the past, and I'd like to start that up again.
Mm-hmm. That's really cool. I don't have a musical bone in my body, so I envy.
So you say that, but you never, hey, those 45s could be the start of a promising DJ career, man. You never know.
That was always, I did do piano when I was super, super little, but I never kept up with it. I wish I did now, because I feel like I could do so many cool things if you know piano.
It's true, but it's never too late. It's not like something like a skateboarding or a snowboarding where it's never too late for that. But you're dealing with knees and aging. Like guitar is something you can do for the rest of your life. So
I've noticed that I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Oh, okay.
And I've noticed that with guys who have previous wrestling experience, they come in and they're just on whole another level. And I never wrestled before, like in high school and stuff. And I've been training for 5+ years now, but you give me a wrestler who's wrestled his whole life and comes into jiu-jitsu, they already have like that grit and the ability to do takedowns, and you give me that and we can build a pretty good jiu-jitsu athlete off of that. We can teach you everything else.
That's
basically.
true. It's got those fundamentals locked down.
Yeah. Yeah. But jiu-jitsu is it's kind of hard on your body sometimes.
Oh, I can imagine. Yeah, 100%.
I was training yesterday. I feel it today.
Do you have to do the ice baths and everything after that whole process?
I'm not the biggest fan of cold,
Okay.
so I don't do those, but sauna.
Okay.
I
Well,
like
you got
heat.
some sort of recovery built in. Yeah,
Get
you
the
have
heat
to.
shock proteins and recover. Yeah.
Yeah. No, man, that's what's up.
Well, everybody out there, thank you very much for joining. My name is Chris. This is Chee-Tash, and I'm joined by a very special guest, Aaron Silvenis. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
You are, and most people don't. So first try, man. That's
nice.
Very, very nice.
Aaron, can you explain for the audience what you do?
Yeah. So I am a intellectual property, business and entertainment litigator. I've been doing that for about a little over a decade. I've been with the same firm, Cohen, Lerner Rabinovitz, in Royal Oak, practically my whole career. Prior to that, I was the last clerk to come out of Scharfus and Christensen, which was a big plaintiff side PI, and they did a lot of cool stuff downtown, and just kind of always had that entertainment side to dabble in, not only being a musician myself, but also just some of the cases that went through those firms. So just managed to parlay that and keep that going. And prior to becoming a lawyer, I worked in the music industry, which is kind of a unique little background aspect. So yeah, so that's what I do.
When you worked in the music industry, did you work for the big three, so to speak?
I did. Yeah. So back, I want to say, back in the mid 2000s, there was still a major label presence in Detroit through distribution offices. So I know, Sony, Warner, and Universal, who I worked for, had their distribution arms up in Troy. So I worked for Universal. I interned there for a summer, and then managed to come on as a college and marketing lifestyle representative for the company, doing different promotions for new signed acts and other legacy acts at kind of the college campuses throughout the Michigan and Ohio. And I was going to Ann Arbor at the time, University of Michigan. Go
nice.
Blue.
Same.
And good man. So that was a lot of fun. I got to work with a lot of brilliant people, and there's no shortage of passion, and some of the most the coolest people that you could ask for to me, especially being like 21 at the time. It was an awesome job.
That is really cool. And you did that right before going to law school?
That's right. So I interned, and that was about a couple, I want to say maybe 2.5 years. And then I got brought on as the college and lifestyle marketing rep. Did that, again, for like 2 years, and was still finishing up my undergrad. And then at that point, kind of the bottom fell out of the industry, and the Universal office in Troy closed. And I saw people I worked for, people I admired, lose their jobs. And I was like, oh, and the lawyer thing had always been something I was fascinated with and been in the back of my head, but it kind of took that as encouragement. Like, okay, I might as well buckle down, take my LSAT, but always kind of keep the music aspect going as well. So
I was wondering, in law schools, is there a specialty, like quote unquote, that you can go down this road of entertainment law? Do they have something like that?
Unless you're going, I mean, I know some schools do, but those are being, I think like a Loyola or a UCLA that are, on the coasts, kind of have more of a, you can go down the specialty. But I went to Wayne State Law School, which was an excellent school. They did have, there was entertainment law classes, and there was also, you could take seminars and do things for like practical experience. And they had the entertainment law class at Wayne with the professor was Howard Hertz, which is one of the top entertainment lawyers in the country. So having somebody of that caliber teaching young students was pretty cool. So it's not like you're declaring like a major per se. Like you're still pretty much taking fundamental courses your first year, and then you kind of can navigate kind of towards what you think you want to do in the next 2 years.
In the law firm that you currently work for right now, is that the only one you've worked for in your career?
I would say, yeah. I mean, after my clerkship ended at Charfus, that place was just kind of disbanding because the partners were retiring. And I was able to, fortunately enough, get on with Steve and Josh, and I've been with them ever since. And they had done a lot of not only entertainment litigation, but just some pretty fascinating litigation in general with intellectual property and business cases. So it was a good fit.
Okay, so it's not just having to do with music. It's like IP kind of spans a bunch of different things.
That's right. So I mean, you'll deal with trademark disputes between businesses. I had a 7-year litigation that I was involved in involving somebody's basically pirating of another company's software program.
Oh, wow.
So you get to deal with some fascinating elements and meet a lot of very, very, very interesting people. But everything from that to doing licensing and production deals for TV shows and different companies. So it's definitely runs the gamut of cool things to do for sure.
Do you remember like the very first case you ever worked on?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. Because it was so absurd. So when I got hired, the managing partner and my boss and mentor, Steve Cohen, he told me, you're going to work on probably the most interesting range of cases. That is one thing I can promise you. The first case he brought in was he put me on. It was a business license had been suspended based on allegations that this business, which was a massage parlor on the east side, had been doing some things that giving customers some extras that were against the law. And we were able to disprove that in the court, won the appeal, had the business license reinstated. It turned out the officer that had been doing the sting wasn't being candid with the board when he applied to have their license revoked. So we were able to get that instated. But I mean, that's like my first case is this massage parlor appeal. So it just ran the gamut from there. So again, never a dull moment.
Wow. Now, lately, I remember the one time we spoke, you were saying that you had to travel out to California was it a case?
Yeah.
Are you having to do that a lot these days, travel back and forth between Michigan and California?
Not as much these days because so many things are on Zoom.
Okay.
The courts have kind of pivoted that way, which in a sense is, it is nice and it's convenient for some things. And for other things, it would be preferable to be in front of the court, obviously. But prior to that, I traveled a lot. With the software infringement case I was talking about, I went all over the country and up in Canada. I mean, I was in Winnipeg in February. I mean, just frigid, just taking depositions. So Winnipeg, in that case, was actually, it started in Michigan, went up on appeal. We won it on appeal. Then it got transferred to Nebraska. So I spent weeks in Omaha and actually came to like the city quite a bit. It was a cool place. But one of those things I never thought, you never think you're going to be up in Winnipeg freezing or out in Omaha for weeks. Or, I probably went back and forth to Omaha like 30, 40 times.
Really?
So,
oh, wow.
Yeah.
Omaha, home of College World Series. And
That's true. That's true. College World Series, great stakes. And actually, really cool record stores,
really?
Which was an added perk. And it got to the point where I was going out there for trial. Like I had so many suitcases, I would kind of like keep a little clearance in one of my pieces of luggage for records that I was bringing back. So it's cool, man.
Oh, that's really cool. I also Berkshire Hathaway is out there.
That's right. Omaha, Oracle of Omaha, Mr. Buffett.
So many things to like about Omaha. I've never been.
Very friendly people. It's a lot like here.
I'm going to have to visit. What's so funny is this area, the reason why I got interested in music, specifically like artists, like the music business, how artists make money, was there's a guy I listen to called DJ Academics. He's like a hip-hop podcaster, blogger, streamer. And I heard him talking about it one day, and I didn't realize that it seems so complicated. Just from me on an outside perspective, and I'm trying to look things up and trying to increase my knowledge on it. I'm just like, God, there's so much here that I have no idea. I don't understand. Even just something as simply as publishing, music publishing. I remember listening to an interview with, I think it was Billy Corgan from Smashing Pumpkins.
Yep.
Yeah. I think it was on Joe Rogan, and he talks, I think he said somebody told him, oh, you got to get in the publishing industry. And I had no idea what that was. Are you able to explain what publishing is?
I mean, I can certainly take a crack at it.
Yeah.
It's not a like you said, it's not a straightforward answer. It's more of an umbrella of a couple of different facets. But in short, the publishers, what they're responsible for is taking your songs. When music in itself, a song is, for copyright purposes, there's two components. There's the actual composition, which is, the lyrics, the words, and then there's the recording. So these are two kind of channels, and those are the channels that the money can flow into based on those. So the publishers take these, these separate, these pieces, And it's the job of the publishers to try and not only make sure that if the songs are used in a commercial or played on a Spotify or in a live in a stadium or whatever, to make sure that those royalties are flowing in based on the artist usage, but also to place and try and build and I would say create value for those assets as well. So you'll see, companies that administer just mountains of these works, and so it's their job kind of act as the not only the bookkeepers, but also just to try and make sure that everything's in order, that the rights issues are in place, and if there's disputes, try and get a handle on that. But these people wear a lot of hats, and your point about how complex and complicated the actual business of music can be, I think you're absolutely right. And I think that it's something that a lot of artists, I think by nature, and it's, I always tell, because my little brother's still in bands, still playing live, and he's a phenomenal drummer. And I've seen, and me having grown up playing in bands too, I've seen bands that I was friends with, and these dudes got major label deals, and then a couple years later they're just kind of down on their luck. And a lot of it comes from just a lack of accessible information for artists, and just the general kind of confusing nature of the business itself, and it's constantly evolving, and the rules keep changing. And so that's kind of that's something that at least I try to be very direct and assist my clients as much as possible with, not only trying to represent them to the best that I can, but empowering them with the knowledge to show, hey, here's how this works. I don't suggest you do this, or I would recommend that you hire an accountant, or if they have they're dealing with exposure from litigation or some other obligations, recommend that they don't file bankruptcy, because at that point there's a very, very good chance that you're going to wipe out your intellectual property assets in the bankruptcy. And you don't want that, because that's their, that's a lifeblood, that's a lifeline for these people. So it's, I think that historically the lack of available knowledge about how the business actually works has been used as leverage against artists. And that's why you hear these horror stories about people entering deals to where, all sorts of money's missing, or, hey, my record went platinum, but I owe the company money. Like, how does that happen? It's like, well, you didn't read your contract, or you had a bad lawyer counseling you. And that's, people think, they want to allocate money towards these different expenses. But I think the best friends for a musician is going to be manager, lawyer, accountant. That's what's going to position you to be as successful as possible, but also make sure that you're getting the best deals possible, because there's a lot of different ways things could go.
So, like, if I'm an artist and I have some success, I have a SoundCloud profile, and I have a lot of views on there, an A&R comes up to me and wants to sign me to their record label, I would, if I was smart, I would say, hey, I would like to seek some representation to represent me in this negotiation. I would come to somebody like you and your law firm to help out, and look at the actual contract.
That's correct. Yeah. I do. And I do that a lot.
Yeah.
And that's, how I've been able to establish relationships with clients, and ultimately, that's led to some really, really cool success stories. But it's you're making sure that from that ground level that you're not entering into a deal that's going to come back to burn you. And I mean, even people from look at Taylor Swift. I mean, she's been in a fight with Big Machine, which is funny. When I was at Universal, that's when she was first breaking as artist, because Universal owned Big Machine. But there's a dispute with her and Big Machine about her masters. So it's just one of those things to where it's, if you can find good counsel at the outset, or, establish some sort of relationship with somebody who's going to look out for you and generally has your best interests in mind. It's paramount.
And are there common things you see in a record contract amongst like all the clients that you work with? Are there like just certain stipulations that are pretty standard in a record contract? Like, it's for like a certain amount of time. You have to put out a certain amount of music in that time, like things like that.
I would say that there are some ballpark components, but everything's negotiable. That's how I view it, and that's how I've gotten my. Again, it's my job to get my client the most favorable deal possible, with also the mind that if he really wants this to go forward, and you want the exposure, I don't want to blow up the deal, but I'm going to press as hard as I can to get the concessions that are going to make the most sense to my client, both now and down the road. So, for example, one of the things that can cause a lot of contention, but people don't think about at the time, is royalty audits and how that process works. Because there can be a whole structure to it, and a lot of times what they'll try to do is, hey, you're only allowed to audit our books for, a window of time at like 1 week at the end of each, annual year, and you have to give notice in this time, and oh, by the way, you got to pay for the audit, and that can get real expensive. And unfortunately, it's nothing but love for Big Sean, but Big Sean found that out the hard way. And so that's something, that's something that can be negotiated at the outset of a deal if you've got good counsel, to where it's like, okay, your attorney will be able to look down the road and see, hey, if this becomes an issue, I can help sidestep these landmines by pushing back on that. And those are usually terms that at the time of the agreement that you can usually get the other side to come to the table on.
Yeah, when I know that one email that I had sent you about that, the Big Sean audited the Good Music record label, and I heard him talk about that on Drink Champs podcast, and something that I had never thought about, because I know of other audits, in regular business and in the world, but I never knew that that's a possibility in the music world. And essentially, is he auditing he's auditing them to get back any royalties that they didn't pay him for some of the music for his music that was played? Like he's auditing them to get back royalties that he's owed.
Yes. Yeah. So just to get back royalties or any unpaid monies or compensation that he would have been entitled to under that agreement with them. Now I don't know if that agreement's public record. I don't think it is. But that would be, he wants to make sure that they're holding up their end of the bargain. Mm-hmm. And the thing about audits in the music business is music accounting is it can get real slippery real quick. So that's, when it comes to those types of provisions, you not only need some kind of structure to say, hey, if I invoke this auditing provision, the first thing is you don't want to be responsible for their attorney fees on top of yours. And a lot of times they'll put that in that language and people won't think twice about it. But when push comes to shove and you're in that position, the last thing you want to be doing is paying the other side's attorney fees. And, there's a chance that clause might not get held up in a court of law, but that would require you to initiate litigation over the audit provision. And a lot of times, though, that's what happens when you try to have, when you've got somebody else basically acting as a escrow agent or holding money that's entitled to you, money can disappear. And expenses and the way that the music business has historically accounted for monies can go a lot of different directions. Mm-hmm. And so that's like, people will, and you'll hear these stories about like these young acts that get signed and they get these advances and then their album does really well. Say it's, initial album sells 250,000, or this is using kind of the physical back in the day metrics, but sells say it goes gold, and they're like, I got a gold record. Where's my money? And like, oh well, you remember that tour bus that you went on tour with? Well, yeah, that was that was coming off. That was going to be recoupable. Oh, and those lunches that the deli trays. Oh yeah, that was recoupable too. And oh, those dinners, yeah, that counted against you as well. And they're like, what the hell? But that's something that needs to be taken into account, because it's not, that's the record labels have it, I don't want to say it rigged, but there's a system and a method to where it's worked for a long time to their best interests. And that's how a lot of artists end up in these positions, to where it's like you have these fairly successful releases and no money. So
what does recoupable mean? You have to like pay that back?
So if basically in short, it's your earnings based on sales are then offset against those expenses that the label's already incurred on your behalf. And there can be a lot of expenses. And you have to keep in mind too, it's not just these, they talk about the tour bus, the deli lunches, but it goes into the marketing and the promotional expenses. And those can be massive. And it's really, really difficult if you're trying to reconcile those for like an audit purpose. Like how do you keep the label honest? And it's not to say that the label hasn't incurred those expenses, but there's a lot of different holes and pockets that those expenses can come from. And there's just a real, I think, disconnect between how those types of things are perceived and how artists are made aware of them at the when they're initially being signed, and then when push comes to shove, the rubber meets the road. I'm like, dude, where's my money? Well, by the way, remember all these things that we did for you? Yeah, that's got to get paid for too.
Wow. Jeez.
And I say that not to make or not to vilify every record label, because there's there's some wonderful people and some brilliant people that have come out of the music business, but the reason that these things become known is because somebody's had a very bad experience with them, and I think it's gotten better for artists now, but it's not where it needs to be. And when I say better, it's because where it was before that was you'd have people that were writing these massive songs or recording these songs and had nothing to show for it. And like and this is a Detroit thing, but like Jackie Wilson, who was one of the just pioneers of like R&B, doing it. This was pre Motown, so this was a dude that Berry Gordy, everybody in Detroit idolized. He got linked up with somebody from Brunswick Records in Chicago. This guy was making millions, not only based on his catalog, but his performing, everything. Had nothing. He died, in a hospital, basically like penniless, because it had just been siphoned, because he had this sideways deal to where these people just kind of took over his catalog, then weren't paying him. And then when he's trying to push back on it, they'd say, well, hey, don't worry about it. Here's the new Cadillac. And then they just kept leveraging these Cadillacs as advances. And it's just, you fall deeper in the hole. And all the while, you think that he's just out on the road. He's making music. He's not an accountant. Nobody expects him to be the accountant or the lawyer. But you think you've got this nest egg. Lo and behold, you don't have anything. So it's just, those types of things are tragic. And that's why, you want to see artists empowered with the information, because and I recognize too that artists it costs money to record an album, it costs money to be in a band, and lawyers aren't free. And I try to do one of the kind of things I try to do just as a general my moral compass is to try and help younger acts and artists with discounted rates and do the best I can to just kind of pay it forward. I think that's a good, if nothing else, it's good karma.
Yeah.
But I realize that that's not an option for a lot of people. So that's why getting and empowering artists with information about the mechanics of the business and how things work from a practical standpoint, I think is key.
That's cool that you do that too. In regards to the record label, I know you touched on this just now. If I'm an artist, what's a record label providing me that I couldn't just do like on my own without a record label?
Okay, so a couple things. The record label has these deep-rooted connections, not only in radio. The record label has radio promotion guys on staff, but also has connections with other bands for purposes of getting you on a tour. They also have connections with media outlets, and that can be if it all goes right, you can the record label can have you show on put on a late night show, or back when MTV actually played music instead of reality shows. That was a big way to placement. But the crazy thing about that was that was just like a promotional tool. Like, artists didn't make money off an MTV, but the visibility drives record sales, drives concert tickets. So it's that's the payoff. But so I think that there's value in the relationships and the experience of labels to be able to help artists navigate the many facets of the music business and help find ways for artists to make money.
And the record label is the record label different than, like, when you said your previous work experience at Universal's not necessarily, they're not a record label, but they have record labels that are a part of it?
Well, Universal actually, it is a record label, but it also is this parent of this conglomerate of other labels. So, for example, and some of the label ownerships changed a little bit, but it was a lot of artists were under, or a lot of labels were under this Universal umbrella, and that being Island, Def Jam, Interscope, Motown. I think Motown shifted over to Capitol now, but you had all these labels under the umbrellas of these conglomerates, and then within that whole structure, they have distribution arms. So that's what would help. You've got the labels, which are traditionally New York and California, and then you've got these distribution arms for the labels that are in the reason they were out in Troy was because in 90s and 2000s. You had Borders, Barnes and Nobles, and Borders was one of the biggest retailers of music in the country. So it's getting the products, getting the the CDs, the albums, the tapes, and dealing with the buyer representatives from those bookstores, or from a Borders, from a Walmart, from a Best Buy, and the way that the distribution companies kind of worked in tandem with the actual labels themselves is. One of the when Billboard metrics, I think, were, I don't know, to say it roughly, mattered a little bit more. When you talk about first week's, people going platinum, people selling 500,000 copies. Oh, yeah. One of the ways to achieve those was to make sure that your initial orders of your products were as high as possible. So how do you do that? The way you do that is you have a strong distribution team that has a good relationship with retail, and that can spark interest at retail by letting retail see the act. So one of the beneficiaries of that when I was at Universal was Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift came and performed in the offices in Troy, and that helped drive her orders up at the Borders, the Barnes and Nobles, all those outlets, and I think it was a real a benefit for her. Other people that, 50 Cent, Kanye, though they would come by because 50 Cent's one of the.
I love 50 Cent.
I do too. The guy is brilliant, and he is one. He's somebody he understands the business. And he's charming. He knows how to schmooze, and he was able to really leverage that because he knows exactly he's gonna do what he needs to do to make sure that these retail buyers are gonna say, oh yeah, let's that order we had for we were gonna put 250,000 in, let's knock that to 3. Let's knock that to 350, and that matters.
Yeah.
So that's how the distribution interplays with the label.
I want to come back to the distribution, but one thing is I don't know if this is fair to say, but it just seems like there's so many record labels out there. I remember at a point, it seems like once a rapper got somewhat prominent, they start their own label. Like Lil Wayne had Young Money, Kanye has Good Music, Rick Ross, Maybach Music Group, Jay-Z, Rockefeller, 50 Cent, G Unit. It just seems like there's so many labels out there, but essentially they are these artists in the mind, if I'm like in the mind of like Jay-Z or 50 Cent, am I saying to myself, okay, I was signed to Interscope in the case of 50 Cent. Interscope was my record label plus Shady Records and all that. But now I want to take control of my own promotion, so I'm going to start my own record label to do that. Is that kind of why these artists start their own record labels? Because for like a little more control over that?
Well, I think that's part of it, but I think the full amount of actual autonomy that they may have in some of these labels is limited because these labels, Good Music, or G Unit, like you mentioned, under Interscope, there's a parent that they're through, and they might run through that for distribution. They might run through that for other aspects because there's things that a label needs to have done, legal, accounting, things like that, marketing, promotions, that these little labels that they create might not be have the capacity to perform. So at that point, you structure some sort of venture within the major label and allocate responsibilities to do that. One thing I think that is useful and is enticing for an artist to want to have their own boutique label, say, is they can then play A&R and bring on artists that they sign to that label, and then that label is connected with the major label, and then say that artist breaks, then whoever brought him to the table is getting a piece of the action.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
That makes sense. Because I could see that. I mean, that happened with, to use the 50 Cent example, like Eminem.
I was just going to say that. Eminem and Dre.
Yeah.
And Dre's all the way up the food chain because Dre's got direct deals with Jimmy Iovine from Interscope. Dre brings Eminem onto the table. Dre's getting a piece of that. Eminem brings 50 on. M's getting a piece of it. Dre's getting a piece of it. So it's all, and that's, again, I think that's what speaks to Dre's brilliance as a businessman and a musician, but being able to have the foresight to enter into these ventures, to position himself to really reap the rewards of successes. Because Dre, look at it historically, like Dre saw how things could go wrong, and Ice Cube, because their association with NWA. And when everybody got burned by Jerry Heller, except Eazy-E, and Eazy-E ultimately got burned by Jerry Heller, Dre found that, he found out the hard way what can happen. He's like, I'm not going to let this happen again. And so Dre, by having, that life experience and by seeing how you can get burned, wanted to ensure that wasn't going to happen to him again. And I think that's, sometimes it's making those mistakes, falling off the bike and making sure that you get back up on the horse and you don't let those same mistakes happen again. I think that's a prime example of it.
And when you say that they're getting, like in our example that we're using, like with 50 Cent, Eminem, Dr. Dre, they're getting like a piece of the royalties off of when 50 Cent's music gets played, but only for the music that 50 Cent has under the record label at that time. So every time his music gets played in a club or even at, like, I don't know, a concert, they're getting some part of that revenue generated. The deals aren't one size fits all, and not seen those exact agreements, I don't want to speculate, but I would, to answer the question, I would say that there's a good probability that not only from sales, but depending on the nature of the deal, the performance royalties and different things like that maybe there's a piece that's not all going to 50 Cent. And you look at what 50 Cent's done for himself as a brand, the vitamin water deal, brilliant. Yeah. I mean, he's been able to take what he had and just parlay it just such a writing books. Like, I mean, I read as one of his books.
I did that the 50th Law, and because I love Robert Greene's The 48 Laws of Power, and apparently 50 Cent did too, and I think he did a nice job doing that. So he knows how to navigate. He's a very, very shrewd and smart businessman. But I think a lot of that is, I think, his own just mind. And his just being a sharp guy, but I'm sure that some of that tutelage also comes from Dre. Mm-hmm. Eminem, same thing. Yeah. You look at how Shady, expanded when it was really at its peak. You had the clothing brand.
I remember that.
Yeah. And you had those all sorts of cross promotions and different things, and then you had the 8 Mile movie, and just really being able to do that. So I mean, that's that was he had major label backing to do that. But to give you a local example of somebody who's done it really without major label backing is and people clown on the group, but Insane Clown Posse, that is a juggernaut as far as they control their licensing, their merchandise sells. I think their offices are still in Farmington.
Oh, that's cool.
They sell a massive amount of merchandise, and then you've got your music. The recorded music, there's a huge market for that. And then they have these touring festivals, that Gathering of the Juggalos. And so they've created this whole universe to where you've got all sorts of money going in and out. And you've had, they were affiliated at one time with a major record label. I want to say it was DreamWorks, because it was owned by Disney, and they got in a lot of trouble and eventually ended up leaving there. But they didn't need the major label backing to really flourish. And then at that point, because they built all this up independently, they're keeping the lion's share of those monies. So those guys are, well set.
Yeah. I do love the examples like you just mentioned, ICP or 50 Cent, that have, like, 50 Cent surpassed his music, kind of. I know he hasn't had an album come out in a while, but he's doing so much now. I mean, he's got a TV show now too.
Yep.
And it's almost like, if I was an artist, I would be thinking about the longevity aspect. I guess it's like you can't play football forever, so it's at some point you're going to have to deal with a career or with what you do outside of football, for if you're like a professional football player. And maybe it kind of sounds like it's the same mentality in the music business as well. Like, at some point you got to start thinking about other things. Not everybody's going to be a fan of, there's going to be a point where your music just maybe doesn't hit as hard as it once did. But I mean, I don't know, Jay-Z, I think this last Jay-Z album was still great, but still, I mean, Jay-Z does a ton of stuff outside of music as well. I remember I was listening to an interview with John Cena, who's a WWE wrestler and actor. He said that Vince McMahon owns the rights to his name, John Cena. This was an interview on Howard Stern, and Howard Stern says, "Are you okay with that? With Vince McMahon owning the rights to your name?" And John says, "Yeah, 100%. Because without the WWE, I wouldn't be in movies today, and I wouldn't be in the state that I'm in right now, and the financial freedom that I have if I wasn't in the WWE and I didn't have like that opportunity." So he said, "Yeah, I'm okay with it." And with what we were talking about earlier, it kind of seems that way with like a record label. Like, sure, on one hand, you are giving up like some sort of control and the royalties to the record label, but you know, if they could also blow you up and you could have an outstanding career from that relationship with the record label. I don't know what you think about all that said. But yeah.
No, I think that's a valid point, and that's the risk reward, because there are some acts that are really, really well suited for, you know, handling and, you know, development by record labels. The problem, at least that I saw, and I think that's still lacking in the record industry itself, is that there's not the emphasis on artist development that you saw in decades prior in the 70s, when they, you know, would allow acts to, you know, have these, you know, hey, if your first album flops, so what? You know, we're going to keep you cooking, and we're going to put you with a different producer, and it's going to hit. And I mean, you look at like an act like AC/DC. That was somebody that was kind of, you know, your first couple albums do okay, but then, you know, then your lead singer dies, and it looks like it's the end of the road. But then they put you with a different producer, find a new lead singer, and boom, you got Back in Black, which is one of the top selling, you know, hard rock albums ever.
Yeah.
So it's something that I think can be very beneficial to the right musician. To your point about John Cena and the branding aspect, I think that's an important consideration that I think all acts need to be cognizant of, is that your band is a brand, and how you allow that brand to be portrayed, or what affiliations that you make or go into, you know, business with as that brand, has impact in the future, good and bad. And that's something that, you know, because certainly, like, you know, if you're an act that just, you're 20 years old, you're not going to probably feel the same way or have the same tastes that you do if you're still in the band at 35. So being able to have good handling and make sure that you're in the right types of deals, to where you're not looking back with dread on some corny, you know, awful, you know, decisions or, you know, promotional campaigns that you got into years earlier, is good. I think with your point about John Cena, I think you know, that speaks to, well, first it speaks to just Vince McMahon's kind of the reason why he's been so successful, is because he was able to take, you know, an industry that was basically split into territories, consolidate it, and then leverage that, and, you know, have all this just massive stable of you know, of wrestlers with these images that he was able to successfully market and capitalize off of. And so because of the, you know, the resources that he put behind it, you know, he makes the argument that, oh, well, it's, you know, I built this. There's no John Cena, there's no Triple H, there's no Stone Cold without me.
Mm-hmm.
Which, I mean, I think, Cena is perhaps maybe more receptive to that than other people might be, because, if you look at what happened with Razor Ramon, Scott Hall, when he defects to WCW, but then makes a killing. Say Diesel, Kevin Nash. Kevin, and you look at the way this goes back to like branding.
Mm-hmm.
Kevin Nash is still being able to leverage just his own, his brand through his name in the cannabis business. So there's all sorts of opportunities if you can make sure that, the way that your image is portrayed and the relationships that you put out there with that image are, not going to come back to cause you heartburn. And an example of somebody who's fiercely protective about her brand, but who does a phenomenal job, is Taylor Swift.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's why she clapped back so hard on Ticketmaster, which I think was totally, long overdue. And it's not this isn't the first time people have been upset with Ticketmaster. But, I mean, I think she does a good job in what she she portrays to her clients. Or not her clients, but her fans. I think she has this connection, this relationship with them, and it's genuine. Mm-hmm. And I think when things interfere with that, these outside forces, she rightfully gets upset, and that's why you're not going to see her doing certain commercials for certain companies, because it's objectionable to her, her brand, mm-hmm. and her, how she wants to have herself presented. And I think she's done a phenomenal job leveraging that.
Speaking of that, I do want to bring that up because I just saw for this new Drake tour that's coming up with 21 Savage, they are Ticketmaster's in hot water again with this concert, and I think there's a lawsuit tied to them offering tickets for the Drake's tour. So I do want to ask you about that. Really quick before, going back to, you had mentioned distribution, and that was another thing when I was looking stuff up. I didn't know what this meant, and I had always just kind of thought that, the label does everything. They're the one-stop shop, but there's these two different or I guess I should ask you this: the label. There's a difference between a record label and a distribution, or can they sometimes be one and the same thing?
Generally, there's going to be a distribution arm, which is going to be a separate entity that is a lot of times, with the majors affiliated with that label, or in other cases. If you've got, a bunch of indie labels, they're going to be distributed through a third-party entity. So there's no overlap in ownership. But, yeah, I mean, the distribution, and, traditionally it was, you think of, like I had mentioned, getting the physical products to retail. But now it's pivoted to where a lot of the major labels have interests in these digital distributors that are responsible for placing artists on the streaming mediums. And so, it remains to be seen how much consolidation in that area is going to be too much. Because I'm just, personally, I'm a proponent of, I like competition. I don't like these behemoths having, giving people one or two sources to be able to do something, and that's it. But the major labels hate competition, and they are historically reluctant to change, and that's why when everything, went digital, and then you had Apple through iTunes selling, single songs instead of albums, they went nuts. Mm-hmm. Because it totally just threw their business model on its head. And or with the whole Napster and Kazaa and all that the file sharing thing. And it wasn't this, I think they made it out to be this bigger boogeyman than it was for, using the axe as the people they put out in the front, like, oh, these, you're really hurting these people. But at the end of the day, like the example I had given about, hey, you go gold and you end up owing the company money. How is that possible? Well, that's exactly because your deal was structured like that. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't like, I think for the axe itself, I mean, I know bigger artists, Metallica pouted, but Metallica's doing just fine, and they're still killing it. I mean, they got 2 dates coming up at Ford Field. Their licensing is huge, so I mean, they're it's just being able to navigate that change. But the digitization totally threw the label infrastructure on its head, and they had a real problem not being able to pivot and follow the technology. And so, that leads to, you've got the clash between the labels and the tech companies, but also just a general reluctance of a label to change. Because that is one thing, from my experience working in the industry, is that it was there's a lot of red tape. And in a creative industry, especially when you're structuring promotions, when you're doing these campaigns, I mean, because Michigan was one of the first schools that Facebook debuted on, I was doing all sorts of stuff on Facebook. And I had gotten, not in trouble, but I had gotten a little bit of a slap on the wrist from somebody saying, "Hey, you got to run it, through me," and me being just kind of being younger, being a little more arrogant. So, okay, I went straight to the person at the label, not the distribution. So, do you like my idea? She loved it. But it was just, and then I got to say, hey, you just make sure you go through me. Don't go to the top of the chain anymore. So it's just those types of things that are, slow things down, and that reluctance to embrace these technologies, which now they have. Mm-hmm. And it's obviously been to their benefit massively. But being able to be, just on, position your business to be able to shift with the changes in technology and with the consumer demand, to be able to, so you're not force feeding people, and being able to be flexible enough to where you can adapt and still be profitable.
Mm-hmm. And when distributing, especially now in this digital world, are these distribution arms the ones who make the choices for, like, I use Spotify. Spotify has curated playlists of, I'm trying to think of some. I know in the rap category there's like Turned Up, there's Rap Caviar. Yep. Are these distribution arms the ones that lobby to put these singles onto those playlists, or are they simply just, hey, Spotify, here's a new album from our artist, upload it?
That's a really good question. And to be honest, I don't know if it's directly from those distribution arms, because, Sony has a big stake in one of the distributors, Universal has stake in others. But I think it's a fair guess that somebody, either at the label or the label via its ownership in the distribution arm, is helping their artists get positioned. And I think that's another way that labels can help acts. Mm-hmm. But then it comes down to, hey, I've got this deal with the label, and I'm making fractions of pennies for these things that are gonna am I gonna be able to see any money at the end of the day? But then the flip of that is, well, the label positions me, I get on this playlist, I get some visibility through a performance or a booking at some outlet, and then I'm able to parlay that, and now I'm on on this massive tour, and I've got money coming in. So it's it's a balance.
And I had heard, again, this was something I heard DJ academics talk about. I've kind of noticed this too. It just seems like albums, I used to love going to like Best Buy or Target and buying like a physical CD. I still have a lot back home at my parents', but now albums feel different. And academics was talking about how now it's all about these playlists. And I guess we should get into streaming and how how these artists are making money off of streaming, because at least from what I saw, it's very hard to make money off of just somebody, oh, I'm just going to click on this song on Spotify and, oh, okay, yeah, you get $1 for this song. But it's not even $1. It's cents.
Yeah, it's for like fractions of pennies.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not. And so to answer your question, how are you going to make money off streaming directly? You're not.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to make the money off of the touring, off of your merchandise, off of other ventures, using that streaming as basically a platform to drive interest in people coming to your shows, people buying your merchandise, people buying physical products. But I mean, the streaming itself, no. And what's crazy is I just read this recently, because people are, everybody's like christening TikTok as the next big source of pot of gold for these musicians. Turns out, and TikTok, I mean, people think the fractions of pennies Spotify is, that they pay. And to be fair, Spotify, and they're working on improving those types of compensation splits. But TikTok is, but they pay even less, like significantly less for artists, and because they view their platform as it's video sharing. The music is totally secondary, so it's not. They don't care. And so there was a story about somebody who had a song that was basically uploaded to, I want to say, like 100,000 different videos, and then within those 100,000 videos, there was like 2.1 billion views. The dude got a $5,000 check. Wow. And you think for that much visibility, there's got to be more to that. Mm-hmm. So we'll see. Mm-hmm. But I think that just underscores the fact that there's other ways for musicians to make money, and you have to sometimes think outside the box about how you do that. But I mean, the meat and potatoes has always been touring merchandise. That's how you're gonna and selling your albums, your vinyl at shows. Mm-hmm. And that's never going to change.
And is the reason why it's so hard for artists to make money off these streams because it's not just like, oh, click on song, you get paid? It's in the totality, at least from what I've seen, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, the totality of streams, your percentage of that totality is what you get paid. So Drake, or actually a better example, maybe Bad Bunny, if you've heard of Bad Bunny before. Yeah. I heard that he was the most streamed artist now, surpassing Drake. So out of all the streams on Spotify, out of the 100% pie, half of that is Bad Bunny. So Bad Bunny is going to get paid based on his percentage of the pie versus, oh, Bad Bunny has like 1 million plays. And I heard somebody on Vice say that it's never been, I forget the exact quote, it's never been easier to make a little money, but it's become way harder to make a lot of money. And I thought that kind of, like, just from my research too, it kind of
that's true,
sums it up pretty nicely.
That's true. That's absolutely true. And I think that this is something that, and there's gonna be a renegotiation soon with these, with Spotify and these labels. And unfortunately, I think it's going to come down to the consumer having to bear the brunt of it, because I think the artists are going to get paid more. But I mean, it's not going to be a substantial shift. It's going to be more. But the source for those additional monies isn't going to be the label giving up anymore. It's going to be them hiking the subscription price up, and consumers are going to pay it.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know what I've had. I mean, when Spotify first debuted, like overseas, I was able to get access to an account to have it before it even like launched in the U.S. So I've followed this company. I think it's fascinating, but I do think that there's a lot of having to structure a deal with the major labels at that time and been able to do it and bring these massive catalogs onto a platform. I mean, it's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not only to have access to that much music. I mean, I think there's just a common people, a lot of people undervalue music just from a public perception because we're used to it now more as a utility than a product. If you look at Spotify, people just expect music to play just like, you go to a public drinking fountain and get water. But people don't recognize and respect the actual amount of work and resources that go into that and the fact that people's livelihoods ride on that. And I think there's that same misconception now with a lot of artists, just in general. So I think there needs to be a spike in public consciousness about how we value music. And one encouraging sign I have seen, though, is this really, really massive increase in physical sales via vinyl. That's been a huge boom to the point where the pressing plants are backed up. I mean, you're an indie band, you want to cut a 7-inch, you might have to wait a couple months because Archer and Third Man are backed up with all sorts of orders from the major labels. And,
Wow.
Good for them. It's cool that Detroit has those things, and you want those places to be around.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just crazy how that's shifted. So I think we're moving in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, there's always there's room for improvement.
Have you actually heard of this one? I have it pulled up here. It's, concurrent resolution. It's a bill that Rashida Tlaib of Michigan proposed, expressing the sense of Congress that is the duty of the federal government to establish a new royalty program to provide income to featured and non-featured performing artists whose music or audio content is listened to on services like Spotify. And it's like resolution number 102 that was proposed just last year, August. Have you heard anything about this?
Now, is that the one that had to do with terrestrial radio as well, and like setting actually paying royalties for terrestrial radio plays? Or that could be different. So maybe I'm not totally familiar with that.
This one, from what I've read, and this is just like a little summary of it, it just in the summary, it doesn't mention anything about radio, just establish a new royalty program that there's I guess 3 provisions: provides musicians whose recorded work is listened to on streaming music services, reasonable remuneration, ensure streaming music services compensate musicians at fair rates, avoids falling behind in investing in musicians within the United States compared to other countries, such and such. It sounds like she's looking after musicians. I don't know the full details of the bill, but to what you were saying, it step in the right direction, maybe.
I think her heart and her focus are in the right place. I don't know how well this would do it in practice, though, because you've got these vigorously negotiated deals between these major labels and these owners of the content, the publishing companies and everything else, and then then the streaming services. So you've already got a contentious. You've got differing viewpoints and differing interests, obviously. Then you start getting government interference in that, and it could. You don't want it to create a situation to where then you end up a bunch of the labels owners of these catalogs saying, well, screw you, I'm not going to do that. And then the people that love music lose out because these catalogs are no longer featured on a Spotify, or they go exclusive with another provider, or you have these labels that have the interest in these digital distributors, and then they create all these new things that are exclusively for them. And at the end of that, then the consumers lose out. So I think her heart it's a great idea, but in practice we're going to have to see how it works out, because there is already tension. I know that there's movement to try and push that along to where it needs to be.
Do you think, could it ever get to a point where you have services right now like Patreon where you can go and donate to, I see it a lot with certain podcasters that I listen to, hey, come donate to my Patreon and you get exclusive content if you donate to my Patreon, and I just use YouTube, Spotify, Apple for just like the free content everybody has access to. Could there get to a point then where you have like a musical act who does something like that digitally? Hey, if you want this exclusive album, donate to my Patreon, else you can't get it anywhere else. Like, could it get to that point?
100%. Oh, and I think like, and you'll see like even like in the kind of the punk indie scene, they're very good at leveraging those types of things already. And even for bigger acts, you look at like, if you go somebody's artist page on Spotify, and at the bottom of it you'll see links to buy merch, buy t-shirts.
I've seen that.
And I think the next logical progression of that is saying, hey, donate to my Patreon for band, and we'll give you pre-sale tickets, the opportunity to get those, or you'll get this signed white vinyl there's only 500 copies. And that's something that's historically, like the punk scene's been good about that, just throughout for many years. But I think that's going to come back to you want to be able to establish that special bond with your fans, and your people are willing to pay for that. And that's something that gets forgotten about, and that's a huge there's a lot of upside in that, because people want that personalized. They want to feel like they have that connection with the act, and there's no better way to do that than send me pre-order our album for $25. You'll get a signed copy of it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you figure you're already going to pay $18 or $20 at the store, hell, $5 for the actual signed by the band, count me in. Yeah. So it's those types of those add-ons, those incentives that I think are going to be. You're absolutely right. Those are going to be huge.
Mm-hmm. That would be really super beneficial, really cool. And I do like it when I know about it, an artist or a band before anybody else does, or like we have our own little cult following of somebody. It makes me feel cool to know somebody.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I feel you 100%.
Yeah.
100%. And it's not even like a superiority or like I'm cooler than thou. It's just like, I love this music and I'm on top of it. Like, and it feels good to be like, yo, check these guys out. Check this out. Like, I think you'll dig this, just to be able to kind of curate music for other people.
Mm-hmm. I remember one time when I was in New York City, and there was people out and about on the streets that were handing out their mixtapes, like these little CDs, and sweet, I'd take one, and I thought that was really cool. I don't know, I don't remember their names actually, but no, that was super cool that they would do that and just get their name out there.
Yeah, yeah, and those. I mean, I don't know how much, but I mean, a couple of years ago, you go down to Electronic Music Festival, to Movement, and there are people handing out stuff, all over the place, which is a cool way to at least drive interest, get somebody to put it in your car.
Yeah,
and I still love the story, although I found out what wasn't true about the dude who was giving out his mixtapes at McDonald's. I found out that wasn't true, and I was devastated. But that was the funniest thing. And you think about it though, it's like it's pretty smart. Like, it just, hey, get your music out there. It's easy to burn CDs. They're cheap nowadays. Get it out there. But guess it depends on the content of the mixtape. But that's if that that's a good add-on for a Happy Meal.
Yeah. I don't find myself at McDonald's too often.
Wait till
nowadays.
you have kids.
Oh yeah, that's
Me
true.
neither until I had kids.
Very true. Yeah. Going back to something you mentioned earlier a few times with Taylor Swift and Ticketmaster. I didn't realize how big of a deal this was until I saw on C-SPAN they had a congressional hearing on this. I never knew that it got this big or like this bad. And like I said, I have the article here, the headline of it. Ticketmaster faces class action lawsuit over Drake ticket prices. There's Montreal-based firm claims that the ticketing behemoth intentionally misleads consumers for its own financial gain. I won't read the whole article, but it basically says they were I think it's called price gouging, where they had one of the plaintiffs bought a ticket for almost $800, and the next day they added another day at that same venue, and the ticket ended up being $350 less for people who purchased it for the second day at the venue. Which, yeah, I would be upset if I bought the ticket for almost damn near $800 and now it's half that price. Is that what they're saying happened with Taylor Swift and Ticketmaster, like a similar situation?
Well, from what I understand, the first rub with the Ticketmaster and Taylor Swift beef was because when the tickets for her tour were released, Ticketmaster servers couldn't handle the demand. Like the server actually, they've been, and I've watched the Senate, the evidentiary hearing, and I've heard both sides of the story. It's unclear exact. The Ticketmaster's saying it was these bots and these spammers. I don't know, because Ticketmaster's system is very, very robust, and that's one of those things that helps Ticketmaster and has allowed Ticketmaster to be so dominant, because they have this system that's been tested and vetted through decades and is built to handle that demand. And so for somebody to come into the business and try and build that from the ground up is going to be practically impossible. So I don't know what really happened, but it resulted in a situation where these people were, in queues to buy these tickets, and they had the, credentials to do it, and they were trying to push this through, and Ticketmaster just couldn't facilitate these people getting the tickets. And it was, then you look at what the fees they tacked on, and just everything just got put out there, and it all got aired out, which is good. And this isn't the first time Ticketmaster's been, well, now it's Ticketmaster Live Nation, that these entities have been, called to the table to explain themselves. I mean, these companies have a history of anti-competitive practices. They now have the ability, because you've got the biggest promoter in Live Nation with the biggest, ticketing provider in Ticketmaster. You've got a situation to where they can use that leverage to put venues in a situation to where, hey, you better book these other Live Nation acts, or I'm not going to have you book, you're not going to get a Metallica, or you're not going to get a Taylor Swift, or, these big stars that that a Live Nation represents. And so you've got two companies that have a history of anti-competitive, anti-consumer practices now together. And it's just, I'm happy it's being brought to the forefront, but I mean, it's long overdue. And the only time that, when Live Nation got into, before they were together, the time that Live Nation was actually competing directly with Ticketmaster for ticketing, things got better. Prices went down. Ticketmaster was losing market share because Live Nation was gaining it. And then 2009, they announced the intent that, we want to merge. It's like, really? And that they had found that, this was going to create a monopoly, or, it was enough to really trigger the scrutiny from the antitrust regulators, that it was going to cause problems for competition in the ticket market for primary services, the primary ticketing market, excuse me. But instead of litigating and saying, hey, we don't want this merger to go forward, the antitrust division at the time allowed this basically consent decree. They said, okay, well, you can merge, but here's some rules. The rules didn't have as much teeth as they should have. And when I was in law school, the summer of my second year, I spent time in Washington, D.C. and actually wrote a white paper for the American Antitrust Institute on this, about the Ticketmaster merger, and gave people some kind, indicia that they could look for down the road and see whether or not the consent decree that they structured was actually working in practice. Because the idea was, okay, if we can give new entrants to the market, or established companies like an AEG that have venues, we can give them the ability to kind of prop themselves up. Maybe they'll become and create enough competition to where the downside from the Ticketmaster Live Nation combination will be offset. In my opinion, and based on what I knew then and know now, that hasn't happened at all. And one of the things that I that's identified in the white paper is, look at how many venues are renewing with Ticketmaster, that Ticketmaster is continuing to keep as their and service as their exclusive ticketing provider. And if you see a downslope, then okay, maybe you see AEG and them come in and take that market share. Good, maybe this is working. But it's been pretty much anything but. I mean, Ticketmaster is as powerful as ever, and now they've got their partner in Live Nation that has this massive power with the acts themselves. So you have this behemoth, and I think the public scrutiny and this attention that Ticketmaster and Live Nation's gotten is good, but it's long overdue. And that merger should have never happened in the first place.
I didn't realize that. So at one point, Live Nation was providing the same service that Ticketmaster was.
Yes, they were doing, basically they were competing directly in that primary market with Ticketmaster.
So if like a place, down here in Detroit, Ford Field or Little Caesars Arena, they have, even for like a basic just Red Wings game, Pistons game, Lions game, they, instead of the venue themselves providing the tickets, they use somebody like a Ticketmaster to, okay, hey, we're going to host the event, but we need you to produce the tickets for patrons to come in here. Is that kind of how that works?
No, that's absolutely correct. And it's not only just, getting the tickets, but it's making sure that everybody, you've got to make sure that the seating and the capacity metrics are taken into account. You've got to make sure that the revenues generated from the ticket sales are accounted for and reconciled and audited after the fact. And that's something Ticketmaster is very good at. And that's, why, after years of building this system that Ticketmaster has, is they're phenomenal at it. Mm-hmm. But that's also why it's so difficult and so unrealistic to expect a venue to put their operation at risk with a ticket provider that doesn't have the same sophistication and experience and success that a Ticketmaster's had. So if you don't have an incentive to switch ticketing providers, you can't expect competition to decrease in the market. Mm-hmm. So therefore, Ticketmaster stays on top. And that's, and it makes sense from a business standpoint, because the venues don't want to put their livelihood in the hands of a inexperienced entity. So it's rocking a hard place.
Did you see this? I don't remember if I read this correctly as far as the Taylor Swift situation, but Ticketmaster, I think, oversold tickets in some situations. So there's not enough seats, but they still sold tickets for some of these concerts. And it's like, well, that doesn't make sense. Where are these people? You have too many people in here. I don't know if that was for Taylor Swift or something else. I can't remember. Have you heard of like situations like that?
Yeah. Well, and it's something that happens, and then when called to task about it, Ticketmaster says one thing, the venue says another thing, the artists say another thing. Everybody's pointing their fingers at the other. I mean, irrespective of the root cause of it, because somebody's, Ticketmaster saying, "Oh, it's the scalpers, it's the artists, the venue." Who cares? The point is that consumers are the ones getting hurt, and these are fans that are spending hard-earned money and lots of it, to go and see these acts they love, because that connection's there, because those artists have built that brand to drive those ticket sales, and to have it botched, and that's why Taylor Swift was so pissed, and rightfully so.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm not gonna, don't think that Taylor Swift is, this charitable angel and all this. I'm sure Taylor Swift's getting a handsome payment from these sales, and there is some control that the artists have over how things are gonna break out when the pot of money is collected. But yeah, I mean, those types of shifty things it's not the first time.
And what is this relationship now? How does this exactly work? So you have the venue, Ticketmaster, Live Nation, and then the artist. And like in our situation, Taylor Swift. How is Taylor Swift making, I guess, how is everybody making money? So like the venue hosting it, do they go out and say, okay, it's 2023, we gotta, we have the Red Wings and the Pistons for such and such months, but for the rest of the year, we gotta fill it with other events. So is the venue, I guess that's first question, does the venue go out and say, hey, Taylor, hey, Drake, we want to host you here. We're going to either pay you this much, and then you handle, hopefully you can generate the sales to make money on your end. Like, how does that exactly work?
So, I mean, it's something that's dependent on the venue and the market itself, because, the Hollywood Bowl or Red Rocks would necessarily have different types of drivers than, say, Ford Field or St. Andrews Hall. But I guess from a top level, the venues contract with, a Ticketmaster to do their ticket servicing. But as far as the actual, the bookings, they would contract with with a Live Nation. And then the Live Nation's gonna, they're gonna figure out the actual structure of how these deals are gonna be done, and they're gonna know that in Live Nation, they're gonna get these marquee acts, generally, and that's why and occasionally, you look at like how Metallica added another date to the Ford Field. I mean, that's something that obviously everybody's gonna make money off that, and so that is. Again, another incentive for venues to do business with not only Live Nation, but Live Nation's partner in Ticketmaster. And there's always the kind of unstated threat that, if you go sideways on one of us, things can get bad on the other end. So you pull the plug on Ticketmaster, maybe you're not going to get Metallica in the future. You're not going to get Taylor. You're not going to get these acts. And so that's I think that's something that's finally being raised, that's very important, and that should have been at the forefront when the merger was announced, because the ability for a combined company to leverage that is, I mean, that's I think it should have been obvious, and it wasn't aggressively pursued enough, I don't think.
And is that to like tie this back into earlier when we were talking about record labels? Is this where having that that contract with the record label is potentially so beneficial? Is that label is promoting you to somebody like Live Nation, like, hey, we've got this great musical act. It would do great at these venues in such and such region, put them on and, get them in these venues.
I think on the one hand, you're right. I mean, the label can definitely help get your foot in the door with, a promoter, and then you'll be able to, grow and, blossom as a live act. And then your deals and your splits get better and better the bigger your draw is. The flip of that, and this is still very prevalent because this is what happened when the bottom fell out on the physical sales of music, is that the label now is entering into deals, these 360 deals, where they're getting pieces of everything. They're getting pieces of the live live gross, the merchandise, and I mean those are again, those are things that work for some acts and don't really work for other acts. And I mean, in my experience, I would not counsel a smaller act to go into those types of deals, because then you're basically totally relying on that label to, it's going to be the paymaster for all of your resources. And you're on tour, you need to buy food. Traditionally, you sell enough merch to go to Taco Bell or something. And now it's, and not to say that still can't be done, but it's just somebody else in your pocket, in your small little pot of money that you're supposed to keep. Now you got to fork this over too. It's like, come on. Like, it's overreach.
Yeah. I've heard of that 360 deal. So like you were saying, that's essentially the label can take what you make off of things that are not even anything to do with recording music. Like you said,
Correct.
A concert appearance and how much money you generate from that.
Correct. And
wow.
Merch, which is another huge
wow.
sale. I mean, so you and I mean, obviously the percentages are negotiated. Is going to be kind of they'll be stepped because of the based on the popularity and the act itself. But at the end of the day, you've got you're forking over more of the revenue to the label for things that have nothing to do with the sale of recorded music.
Wow. That's tough. Jeez. I wanted to ask you about concerts, and what if you don't sell as an artist? What if you don't sell out an arena, or you have a really poor showing? The famous example I saw recently was a rapper, if you're familiar, of DaBaby.
Yeah.
And he had some very not great ticket sales, where to the point where there was people were making fun of him on social media for having like buy one get one free tickets. In situations like that, is it not only as an artist you're not going to make a lot of money just because not a lot of people are coming, but at any point, do you have to pay back any sort of money just because you're not filling the seats and there was an expectation that, oh, you're going to sell out this arena, but it's only a quarter filled and the venue's pissed at you because they're not going to make their money? Does it kind of work like that?
Well, what you see a lot of times is that the act and that risk traditionally is going to fall on the promoter. So the artist isn't going to have to, pay money out of his pocket any more than he's already agreed to give up in his agreement. So you'll have like a Live Nation will, have approached, and structure something with DaBaby to, or say, hey, we're going to have you do, 25 dates throughout the U.S. and Canada. and then it's on, and we're going to give you a flat fee or a certain amount per show, but it's usually like built in. So there's a whole formula behind it. But then so if there's if sales don't go well at one of the shows, Live Nation is very smart about this. They know the business and the trends well enough to where they're going to be able to recover. Say it shows bad in Denver, but it kills it in Atlanta. Mm-hmm. They have that built in to that payout to the baby.
Okay.
So it's the artist isn't usually going to take that hit.
Okay.
It would traditionally fall on the promoter, but it all comes down to what kind of deals that the artist structured with the promoter, because there's a very good possibility too that an artist could roll the dice and say, hey, I'm gonna have more skin in the game than usual, and I'm gonna roll the dice and hope that I kill it on this tour, and then it doesn't end up happening. Well, then the artist gets burned.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay. Yeah. So I could totally see a bigger artist, that could pay out, like Drake on this tour. I'm sure he's going to sell out.
Oh yeah, or
most
like
of
Metallica.
Yeah. But not as big of an artist. Yeah, that's a huge risk.
Yeah, and so that's why, again, it comes down to having good terms in your agreements with your promoters, and when you're trying to plan these tours and book it, depending on who's responsible for actually doing all the logistical work behind it, making sure that you've got a structure in place to where you're not struggling to find food every night after you perform for 2 hours.
Yeah.
And some bands, that's the reality for indie bands that go and take these in a Ford Econoline, go around the country, and there's all sorts of things that can happen, where it's could just be bad promotion for a show, and you got 10 people show up to a gig. It's like, dude, I got to get from Detroit to Pittsburgh. Like, what am I gonna do? And it, for the most part, it seems to work itself out. But and having friends that have been at various levels in the business, things can get real tough. Mm-hmm. It's people have these delusions that everybody's living this Motley Crue 1980s life, grandeur, but anything but, man.
Oh, I could totally see that. Totally. So the promoters are savvy enough to understand, okay, this artist wants to, we're going to go on tour in 2023. And maybe the artist is thinking, I'm going to hit every major city in the United States. But promoters are savvy enough to say, well, okay, you're from Atlanta. You do really well in the South. Not a lot of people listen to you in New York City and the East Coast. So we're not going to go tour up there. We're going to tailor your tour to, Atlanta, Orlando, Miami, Dallas, what have you, around the South. Do they kind of do that sort of analysis when planning this kind of stuff?
100%. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's at a level that's sufficiently granular to where it's insane, the amount of data, and now they have all this information that they can crunch and plug in and kind of look at the general returns from the venue, from the area. And even though COVID flipped the live game on its head, they still are equipped with the knowledge to where they can make informed decisions about, hey, here's how we want to book. Here's what we think you should do. Here's the regions and territories we think you should hit. And here's what you should we're not going to go heavy, and maybe you do one New York date, but you're not doing a whole East Coast tour if you're want to stay and your money is going to be made in the South. Mm-hmm. At least, if you're at a point in the career where you don't want to be in the upside down.
Mm-hmm. And is it, would it be like the same for the size of the venue too? Like, hey, you're just up and coming, we're not going to put you in the Mercedes-Benz Superdome. We're going to put you in just a nice little, like the Royal Oak Music Theater, no, a little bit smaller venue. It's not Little Caesars, something like that. So is that also taken into
100%?
Yeah.
Yep. You look at what where the act is at in their career, what the act, what their numbers are, what you think is going to be, what kind of capacity and what kind of demand you think there's going to be, and then kind of plug it in based on, the what's going to be most suitable for that particular act at that particular point in time.
Yeah, there's so much that goes into this.
Right?
Wow.
It's crazy, man. I've been the game keeps changing, and that's why it's people, the managers, the attorneys, the accountants, everybody does the best that they can, but it's something that you just got to do your best to stay on the pulse of, because it's it's still constantly evolving, and it's trying to wrap all these all this interplay is tough enough for me, and I'm not the one writing the songs. I'm not the one playing, 2 hours on stage every night. I'm not the one, traveling from venue A to venue B. So you can't expect musicians to be on top of all this stuff. It's just unreasonable. So I think that just underscores the need for, you gotta musicians to just find, good counsel and have the ability to make these decisions, because it's something that's just you can't expect them to do. And when people clown on these musicians, well, you shouldn't have signed that deal. Well, it's like, dude, hindsight's 20/20. Yeah. And were you the musician? Were you the dude on tour? No. So respectfully sit down. It's easy to hindsight is 20/20. It's easy for people to clown on these poor decisions, but you don't never know unless you're in the shoes of the artist what's going on.
Now, as far as your clients go, have you ever had clients who are just the songwriters? So they don't perform at all. They're not, I don't know if, I wouldn't say they're musicians, maybe they still are, but they're just plain songwriters. Have you had clients like that? And is the game different for somebody who strictly is writing lyrics versus somebody who's performing them?
Very.
Yeah.
It's a totally different. Yeah. The business is very, very different.
Does it also go for, is there also a difference now between the songwriting, the musician, and then like if this is, speaking of like rap, hip hop, like the person who's producing the beats, like the beat maker?
Yes. Yeah. And the producer provisions, and that's something I've done quite a few deals on, and that's something that's continued to evolve too, because of how the sampling laws and everything else with that, with the copyright legislation and precedent has come into play. So that is all. Yeah, those are all separate facets. So what points or terms you'd want in a songwriter agreement for your client is going to be totally different than when it comes to a producer.
And is it usually if you have a band, usually the person performing is also writing, would you say? Like that usually, like Drake, well, Drake's not a great example because people have said he's had ghostwriters, but somebody like Kendrick Lamar, he writes his raps and then he performs them. Is that usually how it goes in music?
So that would depend on a lot of times the particular genre. So if, in the pop, these top 40 industry,
Justin Bieber and
it's not, he's not writing his, maybe, to my understanding, he's not writing some lyrics. So you have, and at that point you've got, you got your songwriter, and then you've got the actual performing musician. So, and that kind of dovetails with how the copyright's split, because you've got the part that's the composition, and then you've got the part that's the recording. So,
okay.
So when the song's played on, I guess the radio is a bad example, because song is played on the radio, the people that have the interest in the composition part of the copyright, that piece of the pie, they're getting money. But the actual artist whose recording is being played on the radio are not getting paid.
Really?
There's I think it's like fairness in music. There's some sort of act that finally the U.S. I think at the time, like, we finally got on top of this, but just to show you how backwards things were. Before this, it was, I believe, the U.S., Iran, and North Korea were the only countries that weren't, like, compensating the artists for the recorded, playing recorded music on terrestrial radio. It's nuts.
Jeez.
It just shows how difficult it is to make it as a musician.
Mm-hmm. Jeez. Well, I know North Korea is big into, or no, that's South Korea's K-pop.
Yes.
They're really big into K-pop. Yeah. I've heard horror stories with K-pop artists.
Yeah, and apparently, like, I read something like recently about just talk about consolidation, because there's a power struggle right now between these K-pop, one of the entities that owns all these K-pop rights, and then one of the streaming services itself. So that just people start. You got too many hands in the cookie jar, and it turns into a real mess.
Mm-hmm. Jeez.
Yeah, it's wild, man. It's a crazy business.
With the songwriting aspect of music, is that where publishing fits in, to go back to what we were talking about way earlier? Or is...
Yes.
Oh, does it? Yeah.
Yeah. And so, if you're a songwriter, and one of I think the best examples, like, you look at like the country music industry, and I'm this writer, and I want to get my lyrics linked up and have them performed by a up and coming country act, and so what you'd want to do is get a lot of times what writers will do, they will get signed to these companies that then go and pitch these written songs and place them with the musicians, and then the output is this recorded this song that embodies both your written her lyrics and his recording of it.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's a totally different. It interplays with the recorded side of it, but it's a whole nother world too, and there's a lot of money in there.
Yeah.
If you can get the right plugs and start getting a name, and have if your paperwork's on point, yeah, you can make a great deal of money from the composition side.
Wow. So you actually have people out there that all they do is just write songs and just say, "Hey, I just wrote this great song, and I think you should perform it." Wow.
Yeah, and it's still, and again, that's why I gave like the Nashville country example, because that's still very prevalent. But in the 50s, there was in New York is a Brill Building, and what they'd have is all of these writers in these small little rooms in this big building in New York, like with pianos, and they would just kind of hammer out like words and lyrics, and just it made some of the some amazing and just touchstone rock and roll songs. And you got like Goffin and King or Lieber and Stoller. These were people that was what they did. Mm-hmm. And then once these songs got plugged with an act, or some act would take them on, do a recording covering, and it wasn't uncommon for several acts to do their version of one of these songs. And so if you're the composer, and if your deal's right, you've got 4 lanes of money to make off this one writing. Mm-hmm. So Jeez. So that's the aspect to where you can make a lot of money, mm-hmm. If you're in charge of that. But a lot of times, in order to get the exposure and to get that plug into the Nashville, or with these these pop acts, you're going to have to give up a piece of that.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. Jeez. Let me ask you this to pivot a little bit. Masters. And I've heard this term thrown out a lot lately. In the rap world, there's a lot of talk on, you got to own your masters. What does that mean, that you 100% own your song, like the recording of your song, and you control the rights and licensing, what have you, of that song, versus traditionally, like, the label would have control over your recording?
That's a good, no, that's accurate. Yeah. Yep. That's a good summary of it.
And it seems like there's been a movement, but I don't know, I could be wrong, that, a lot of artists now, they want their masters, their rights to their music. I know that example earlier we gave of Big Sean, because I know Kanye went on he was saying how, I want control of my masters. Then Big Sean said, well, I don't even have control of my masters, but you want control of yours. So it's kind of, you're being kind of like hypocritical in a way. I think he ended up making it right, but is that kind of the situation that a lot of artists are in? They are not in complete control over the music that they make for these record labels?
Generally, yes. When you're signing these deals, it's pretty much, you're gonna give up some piece of that recorded copyright, the master. The one encouraging thing for the artists that I've seen that's really proliferated recently is there's what's called a copyright reversion or a termination. And what that is after 35 years, and just to kind of put it like recently, I think MC Search was talking about how Third Base just was recently able to have their reversion take place. Or for another example, everybody was asking, well, with the Jay-Z and the Nas DJ Search with the Illmatic, the masters of that, like, well, why didn't Nasir doesn't he want to own his own music? It's like, no, because Nasir is smart enough to recognize that, hey, the window's going to open real soon on Illmatic. I'm going to be able to exercise my termination right. I'm going to get it back anyway. So hey, you want to lease it and pay me X amount, and you want to have 2 years of, the last 2 years before I get it back? Fine. So that was the mechanics of that. So it's basically, it's a statutory grant to allow artists to be able to recapture their works. It's one of it's because the copyright, there's a lot of copyright laws that don't help artists, so it's one of those things that's in statute that has proved to be very very beneficial.
Okay. So would you say, is that an advantage of not, could that potentially be an advantage of not being a part of a record label? Is that, hey, I just own my masters, like, outright, as just being independent?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, certainly. But then you're going to have to figure out, okay, how am I going to do my promotion? How am I going to, drive visibility? And now, the game's changed so much to where it's like people have access to so much music, which is a wonderful thing. But how do you stand out amongst the 6 million or how many choices they have on Spotify when they listen to it? So it's kind of the give and take. Because you can own your own masters. I mean, hell, the two of the records I gave you from like the Liver Noise, like me and my brother's bands, we own our masters, but they're not worth too much. You know what I'm saying? So it just kind of comes to what you want to do with it and how you perceive and want to pursue your musical output.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So there's a give and a take
Always.
with it. Yeah. I had heard earlier, I had mentioned Bad Bunny, and I heard DJ Academics talk about how Bad Bunny is not only, one of the top streamed artists, but Bad Bunny is independent. But then when he went to break it down, it's not independent in the way that I thought it meant independent, in that Bad Bunny still has a distribution deal through, I think it was Sony. So to me, when I think independent, I think, okay, I'm doing everything on my own. But still for Bad Bunny, okay, maybe he's not attached to, he has his own like promotional marketing team, but he still has to get his music out there to the world. Yeah, I had a different notion of being independent versus maybe like the technical, like meeting the threshold of independence.
Well, no, I think your notion's correct, and I think that's how a lot of people would perceive it. And I think if you want to look at like examples of like truly independent for the most part acts, like you look at like a Fugazi or something like where you've got an act that's kind of in control of their touring, their music, their everything.
Mm-hmm.
But even with a Fugazi's album's got to get from where they get pressed to the record store. Mm-hmm. So there's going to be some kind of reliance on a distributor. People just don't really you don't consider it because it's not one of the fundamental core things that come to mind, and that's fair.
Yeah.
And it's just learning about and working in that distribution side of it, so it opens up your eyes like, wow, it's really, there is a purpose here, and that's and now with the digital platform, certainly, I mean, I think an artist like Bad Bunny would need to have some sort of valve to be able to get his stuff out there, get his stuff placed, and be able to get his much compensation as he can from his work being exploited.
Mm-hmm. And I know a lot. We've been talking a lot on the artist side of things. I was wondering if I could switch it with you to the perspective of a record label, and is the job of somebody working at these record labels, like how hard is their job in just finding talent for their record label? Because I gotta imagine you can't just sign anybody to a record contract. I mean, I guess you could, but
then you won't have a job for very long if they don't blow up. Yeah. Or there's not some movement. Yeah.
So are these record labels, I guess, is it kind of like a professional football team where you have the NFL draft coming up, and hey, I'm not going to just draft anybody. I need to draft, where I need people. Like this year, we really need a quarterback. So with our first round pick, that's of utmost importance to us. We're going to draft a quarterback. Are those kind of thoughts running through a label's mind? Like, okay, we need to kind of be picky with who we select here to offer a contract.
Absolutely. And certain labels historically have certain strengths in certain genres. For example, Def Jam and hip hop,
mm-hmm.
or like Elektra in hard rock. I think Elektra's been gobbled up by somebody else, but just for Roadrunner with metal. So you're looking at your historical strength and your current roster, and evaluating, okay, how am I going to be able? Is this something we're going to be able to take and run with, and it is going to work out for everybody? And so that's definitely something that goes into signing these acts. And it's another thing is just personalities. Are these artists going to be, are these guys' egos out of control? Are these guys going to be able to come to these promotional events? Are these guys going to be able to do radio? If we book them all these appearances, are they going to just make asses out of themselves? And that's a thing that definitely happens, and that's so there's a lot of. And those are things that have nothing to do with the music.
Right.
It's just personalities and, logistics and strategy. Because the labels themselves are going to have the relationships with the radio people, or they're going to have radio people on staff that are doing the promo.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to come down to what the label knows it's best at historically, where the label wants to go, and how much resources the label has to put behind developing acts, which unfortunately is nowhere near what it used to be, because the labels aren't flush with cash like they were in the 90s and 2000s and early 2000s. But ideally, as we've got this resurgence of physical sales. The labels are still now they don't have to do anything, because they're a lot of them are just reissuing stuff that they put out years ago, and they're selling like hotcakes.
Mm-hmm.
So the label can, if assuming that Led Zeppelin, for example, or somebody like these classic rock acts haven't recaptured their copyright, the label can still exploit them. The label can press all these vinyl records, and it's a payday. They don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
So, and at that point, the hopefully you would see the label reinvesting those monies into building back artist development where it needs to be, to help these acts that they sign and watch them blossom and grow. Like the same way, like a Aaron Rodgers under Brett Favre. And I don't like either of those guys, but I'm saying those to have somebody watch and to have that to be able to grow as a professional, whether it be athlete or musician. And then when it comes time to be able to really, okay, your third album, we got you with the right producer, we're going to push this hard, and then let it go. Same way, letting somebody debut and take over that quarterback position.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, I like the sports analogies. I really connect with those. So I appreciate the Brett Favre and
or sorry to interrupt.
No, absolutely.
I was just sports analogy. Look at minor league baseball. Before you get called up to the show, you'll be there for a long time if you ever get called up.
Oh yeah.
And so that I think historically, traditionally, you'd have labels. They had no problem with having you kind of incubate and refine your skill set in those minor leagues. And when it's time to get called up, put that money behind you, put that promo out, get that get that press and publicity. They knew you were ready, and that's why when you don't have that, you see a lot of acts that just don't have the longevity because they never were built for it, or had the just time to develop as both artists and people.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Do you think too these labels are kind of like what we were talking about earlier with the data and analytics side of these venues and selling tickets and going on tour? Are the labels too very abreast of current trends, current analytics, and say, I'm trying to think of like an example. In hip hop, drill music there was kind of a wave. I don't know if it's still here, but there was a really big wave where lots of drill artists were very popular. Do you think these labels have sit downs and meetings where they say, okay, drill music is really hot right now. We would love to get an artist who is in this subgenre onto our label and start, having them produce music for our label that's drill music because it's the hottest thing right now, and we think that we can make money off that. We can make a return on investment. Are they kind of using the same analytics?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's something that, with these to age myself, because I've seen this happen when MySpace was so huge, in the late 2000s as a resource for music to, have all these, you got these unsigned acts that are top of these charts. Mm-hmm. And you also had avenues like, retailers like Smart Punk and other places that would have, you could actually see what these acts that had no backing were doing, and the kind of sales and attention they were generating. It was, I mean, not even, it was not uncommon. It was almost everybody was looking at those charts and plucking the top bands off them. And that's how you got that whole emo core, that movement that, late 2000s and on, and an act that, has really been kind of that came into that, but has now just become so much bigger than that is like a Fall Out Boy.
Oh, yeah.
And they're still around and they're killing it.
Yeah.
But I think that was an act that, came up, playing punk shows, playing clubs, were tight musicians, wrote good lyrics, and have been able to continually just grow, develop their fan base. It's not, you watch Sunday Night Football, you're going to hear at least one Fall Out Boy song you go for a commercial. But it's like good for them, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But not all, a lot of acts weren't poised to be able to do that. But so to answer your question, I think it's something that the labels absolutely are abreast of. And I think the analytic aspect of it's only probably just growing, just as it has in baseball or any sport, to be honest.
Oh yeah. Your MySpace example reminds me of, just like a few years ago, there was a huge SoundCloud rap movement where you had people, these young kids, like Lil Pump, XXX Tension. There's many other examples, but yeah, they would just put out their music on SoundCloud and it would generate tons of listens. So yeah, labels, you think labels were definitely like paying attention to those things?
100%.
Yeah.
Because these people that work at the labels, these are people that are, it's not dudes in suits in corner offices. It's people that are out there going to the shows, talking to the people at the record store. They're in their ears to the ground. So they know where the heat is, and they know where things are probably going to go. So these are very, very, very smart people. And it's just, it's unfortunate that there's not more of a careers in that industry, and hopefully as the labels continue to make cash, that it can expand a little more, because I worked with some phenomenal people, and just to see that type of talent, it's a cool job, and it's something that these people are absolutely looking at all those different avenues to be able to really not only grow their careers, but like bring on these acts and help them grow.
Yeah. I've even heard, with streaming services now, how global music has gotten. Like we mentioned K-pop earlier. I went to a K-pop show, actually.
You did? How was it?
It was a lot of fun.
Right on.
It was so much fun. I don't remember the groups that I saw, but from what I heard, because I went with a friend who is very big into K-pop, and he said, these groups that you saw here tonight, they're selling out stadiums back in Korea. And I just saw them in this little venue in Texas, small little venue, not a lot of people there. And I for the life of me, I would have never have thought that I'd see a K-pop show. Do you think streaming services have made music more like global, and like the spread of music from all these other countries? It's just way more available now that you get exposed to K-pop, as an example.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Just the fact that, you going to that K-pop show in Texas, and even though it might not have been the stadium that it would be from their native land, the fact that they're getting booked at these smaller venues all the way across the world, I think speaks to it.
Yeah. I've heard that Latin music is really big right now, which is why you see a guy like Bad Bunny that is so popular. I would have never have thought that. I don't really listen to Latin music. I remember back in the day, Daddy Yankee.
Oh yeah.
But other than that, I would have never have thought it. But lo and behold, it's hugely popular. Do you think labels also take that into consideration nowadays? And like music isn't just a US thing now, it's like a worldwide thing.
Absolutely. I mean, it's, the bigger labels have all, Latin American offices, and, and they'll have their US flagship for Latin America in Miami. And it's a huge, and a lot of times they make so much money that it's a completely separate, they might have Universal Latin and Universal Music Group, but it could just be totally different ownership. Because it can stand on its own. Mm-hmm. But you're right with the Daddy Yankee example. And there was, right around, because that was when I was like interning at Island Def Jam, and I remember one of the signings for like Rockefeller at that time was like Hector the Father, like same kind of like reggaeton, and I think he had it was through Rockefeller. The album sucked, but it just shows you that there's still people are keeping their eyes and ears to what's going on throughout the world for sure.
Mm-hmm. That's really cool. I have one last question for you. Sure. And so I've been like firing questions at you for over 2 hours now. This topic is so fascinating, and I truly appreciate your expertise on this. You ever, with artists who pass and their music continues on, but I mean, there's been a lot of examples in rap. Most recently, I guess, you had artists like Pop Smoke, Nipsey Hussle, XXX. I mean, the list goes on and on. Mac Miller. Now, they pass on, but we can still play their music. And I guess I'm wondering, does it get into a tricky situation when artists pass on and their music's still making money for somebody, but where does it go now? Does it, the percentage that the artist was making, does now that percentage just go straight to the record label? Do you ever deal with stuff like that?
Yes. And it can be a nightmare. Trying to put an already complex puzzle together. It's like, okay, all right, put on a blindfold. Now put the puzzle together. Because you not only have to track, okay, where's the money going, but who's entitled to the money? Because you've got, and again, this, with a lot of musicians, there was no, they didn't have a estate planning attorney. They didn't have these things set up for their passing. So where does it go? And then you have also this litigation that pops up between heirs trying to claim rights to, you've already got a sliver of the pie. Now you got to split the sliver into 4 different pieces. Who's got, is that the correct result, or who's got superior claim to that? Mm-hmm. So it just triggers a whole panoply of just problems and questions. And in truth, I've been able, and fortunately, I've been able to navigate and finesse some of those things successfully. But I will say, just in the Detroit area generally, I mean, look at what happened with the J Dilla estate. There was all sorts of controversy about that because there was some mistakes made with the people who were originally responsible for the estate, and then there was tension with his mother, who's still alive, and tension with DJ House Shoes, and it just really and that's that's where you got 3 players. Now imagine you've got a band like a Parliament Funkadelic, and you've got 5 or 6 people making contributing both to the writing and to the music, and you got people passing away. You got multiple heirs, and now you're trying to figure out where things go from that end. I mean, it could be a nightmare.
Yeah, jeez. I wouldn't want to be in a situation like that. Jeez.
Yeah, no, it's and it's unfortunate when you're counseling somebody, and you have to, one of the things that I've always thought is, you don't, I'm not going to BS you. I'm going to, I feel like I owe that to my clients, just to, like, I'm not going to, throw you a bunch of puffery if I'm not going to be able to back up. If I tell you, like, hey, I'm going to be able to help you out, I'm going to follow this through. Word is very important. And unfortunately, I've had consultations with people to where it's been so, just blowing up on the document side of it, to where it's like, dude, you have to explain to them that it's, unfortunately, I don't think that there's a good outcome for you here, and I don't want you to put good money after bad.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
and can something like just having estate planning kind of mitigate a lot of issues when this sort of thing happens?
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's funny. I interviewed a guy who wrote a novel. It was called To Save a Nation. His name's Robert Cass, and he's actually a lawyer. He's an estate planning lawyer. I don't know if that's like the exact title, but that's
that is. Yeah.
That's what he does. Yeah, for his full-time job. And then he writes on the side. So it's kind of, yeah, it's funny. That was like one of the first interviews I did, and it all comes back full circle.
Hey, it does, man. And I think that just again underscores the fact that, as a musician, your accountant and your attorney are going to be two of your best friends, and the ones that you should be, select carefully and, think long term, because there has to be that unity and that shared vision, mm-hmm. because it all, to ride off into the sunset, you got to have the pieces in place. And so that's how everything works together.
Yeah. Well, Aaron, this has been a real pleasure, and I know I've just bombarded you with tons of questions on this topic, but I find it truly fascinating, and I truly appreciate your expertise and you coming down here, sitting down here with me and talking to me about it. It's been a lot of fun.
It was my pleasure. Chris, thank you again, man.
Yeah, thank you. And for people who want to get into contact with you, is your law firm's website, is that the best way to contact you?
Yeah, that's so either that or Aaron Silvenis at Cohen, Lerner Rabinovitz, and that should have my contact information there. And yeah, I'm always happy to take meetings and always willing to talk and hopefully help new clients out however I can. So again, Chris, I appreciate the opportunity. It's my pleasure, man.
Oh yeah, no, thank you so much again. Are you on social media at all?
I am.
Twitter or...
you know what? I have an Instagram. I don't do the Twitter anymore. And, I've got a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and, much love to my beautiful wife, Lindsay, and my kids, Jonah and Gabriel, but I just don't have time for it anymore, man. And I feel like people don't really want to, like, what's this 37-year-old guy with 2 kids got to say? Like, I don't know. It's with the Twitter, I don't know. The Instagram I have, Facebook I have, under my name, but, yeah. So, and I try, I'm going to try to get, as this Ticketmaster thing progresses,
mm-hmm.
Because I have experience and published work out there through American Antitrust Institute, you might see me popping my head back up on some things. So we'll see.
Very cool. Well, Aaron, thanks again. Really appreciate it. And thank you to everybody out there for listening. My name is Chris. This has been Chee-Tash. Take care, everybody.